Hello, everyone. Welcome to Module 6 live Q&A session for Tech for Good, the role of ICT in achieving the SDGs. This week's expert session will be with Eduardo Diniz, Professor at Fundación Getulio Vargas. Sorry for my Portuguese. I'm Sandra, and I will be moderating this 30-minute session. We've had some great questions this week, and I've selected a few for Eduardo to answer. Welcome, Eduardo.
Welcome. So, hi.
So the first question, which is quite interesting, is a lot of people don't trust the formal financial system, especially after the turmoil of the 2008 recession and high-profile corruption cases. People don't believe that banks work for them. What can banks and other financial actors in the formal system do to restore public trust? And who should have oversight of this process?
So first of all, thank you very much for the question. It's a very interesting one. So in my opinion, the formal financial system has a role to fulfill in our world still, even after a lot of the cases that we mentioned. So the recession of 2008 and everything. But what can happen, I think, in the future? So the formal financial system will recover its trust for the most of the public because it has done a lot of things in the past also. The thing is, as the world is becoming more and more sophisticated in terms of technology and in terms of the sophistication of the financial services. So we're going to have opportunities for different actions in terms of the financial providers. So what I see in the future, so it's a kind of what I call the financial, inclusive financial system, meaning that we will have different actors playing different services or offering different services for different levels of clients. So then banks will still have a role, but I see other players like microfinance institutions, credit unions, and many including independent or not totally financial institutions, like even retail stores and many other players doing some kind of financial services, offering some kind of financial offers in the market. So meaning that we will see more and more actors in the ecosystem and the financial ecosystem. So I believe that banks will still have a role in the future. Okay, I don't know if this was clear, but I really believe that banks will not be vanished completely. So fintechs will come, other players will come, but banks will still have a space in the financial ecosystem.
That's interesting. It'll be really interesting to see what kind of role they do play amongst all these different actors. Now I can, just imagine whether they'll still be ahead of the chain, of the ecosystem chain, or whether there'll be some kind of other decentralized system. But maybe that leads on to the next question. So one of the learners says, I'm still not sure I understand blockchain, but I hear about it everywhere. Can you explain it again and why it is important to financial inclusion and the SDGs?
Whoa, that's a very nice question, because this is the hot topic of the moment. So I'll try to be very short in the explanation of blockchain. Blockchain has four main elements. So the first element is what we call distributed ledger. What is a ledger? The ledger, it's a book of records where we take notes of everything that happened. So when we make a payment, for example, through a bank, what a bank does actually is ledger. So the banks have the kind of centralized ledger. So for example, if I'm going to make a payment to someone else, so I ask the bank to make this payment for me. So I go to my internet bank, so and I make a request for the bank to make the payment. So, and then because banks has control of my ledger, so the banks actually do the payment for me. What we have on blockchain is that no one alone takes care of the ledger. So the ledger is distributed, meaning that everybody that take part on the network has a copy of the ledger. Meaning that if I want to make a transaction with someone else in this network, so we have a kind of social control on this ledger, meaning that if everybody has a copy of the ledger, so then everybody can validate if I am able to make this payment or not. And this comes to the second element of the blockchain, which is the consensus rule, meaning that to validate a transaction, so this transaction should be validated in the network in a consensus system, meaning that all the participants of the network that have a copy of the ledger will say if I can or cannot do the payment that I want to do. So when they do that, they validate or not validate my request for doing this payment. So this is the second element, which is the consensus. And then once the consensus creates a kind of a validation of a request, for example, I want to make a payment, so then my request of making this payment was validated by a consensus rule in the network. Once this transaction is validated, so then we make a cryptography on this this information. So this payment is done, for example, if it is validated, so this payment is done, and after this payment is done, the ledger must be updated, meaning that if I had $10, for example, to make a payment for $10, I will have now in the ledger the information that I have $10 less, and the person who I send my payment will have information in the ledger that they have, the person has $10 more. So this new information in the ledger is made, is validated and cryptographed. So meaning that this cryptography system will ensure that this information, this payment that I have just done, will be recorded and cryptographed. So meaning that no one can change this information ever. So this is the third element. And then the fourth element is what we call smart contracts, meaning that, for example, if I made a payment, for example, I can do other things after this payment. For example, I will receive a service or a product that I bought. So then the order to this service or product to come to me will happen. So this is the fourth element. So then 4 elements: distributed ledger, consensus, cryptography, and smart contract. When this is all done, this whole process is completed, so then we close the block. So because we are talking not about, of course, only one transaction. At the same time that I want to make a transaction, other people want to make transactions in this payment network, for example. When all those transactions together are validated, they are validated in a block of transactions. As long as this block is validated, this number of transactions is validated, this block is closed with the cryptography, and then it comes a new block that comes after. So then that's why it calls blockchain. Actually, it's a chain of blocks. Each block with a number of transactions validated by a consensus and cryptographed to guarantee that all this information will never change ever. I'm not sure if it was clear, but this is the idea.
Very, very clear. Very interesting. Well, actually, I could actually lead on to the next question, actually specifically talking about cryptocurrency. And is one of the learners says, you know, that is the adoption of cryptocurrency and other such payment methods important for sustainable development? And if so, how should it be done, and how should the adoption be easier and more accessible? I mean, I guess what this learner is referring to is the digital divide, you know, and where cryptocurrency could probably fit into the traditional ecosystem, financial ecosystem, and why is it important, and what can be done to make it more accessible?
Okay, that's also a nice question. Actually, this is the main topic of my researches right now. And more specifically, I've been researching for quite a long time what we call community currencies. Community currencies are a kind of currencies that are valid or accepted, or they're used only in a specific community. Like, for example, in a neighborhood, it's we can have one neighborhood with just a specific type of community currencies. What I see now, that's I've been researching for in the last few years, is that a number of community currencies are adopting the technology of cryptocurrencies. So actually, when we talk about cryptocurrencies, we are talking about many different types of currencies. There's those ones that I'm telling you, the crypto community currencies are a very interesting way to make community currencies more accessible to people in the developing world. So, for example, I can tell you the story here in Brazil, but it's the same in many other countries. We have here in Brazil a big network of what are called community banks that issue each bank issuing their own community currencies. Those community currencies here in Brazil are in the process of changing their payment platform for a blockchain platform, meaning that those community currencies are becoming crypto community currencies. I can tell you examples from other countries. One that I like, it's one called Aurora Coin. Aurora Coin, it's a crypto, a social and community cryptocurrency that is used in Iceland, for example. But there's also in Ghana, there's community currencies, social community currencies there in Ghana, in many other countries. In Argentina, there's a number of social and crypto community currencies. All those currencies are local, are accessible to poor people, and they actually are a way of using cryptocurrencies to increase financial inclusion in those regions, and also, of course, as financial inclusion contributes to the SDGs. So then, social cryptocurrencies have been playing a role on this process.
Brilliant, excellent. I'm wondering, sorry, this is just off the top of my head. This is all fantastic, isn't it? But it also involves a lot of technology.
Yes.
So, you know, again, posing that question about the digital divide, so people in marginalized areas that maybe don't have great access to broadband, or so do you have any suggestions of what needs to be done there, or does this need to be done on the government level?
So, yeah, there's many ways to solve this problem. One way is that so many of the process can be done, many of these transactions through cryptocurrencies can be done offline. So, and then they are updated only when the person is connected online. So it doesn't mean that the person should be online all the time. So I've been witnessing some experiences of this in the Amazon, in the region of the Amazon, where internet access is quite hard. And then what people do, they do the transactions. Actually, every transactions in the cryptocurrency system, it's not an online transaction. It's a request for transaction. It's like the same when you do in the bank. So when you want to make a payment in a bank, actually, you don't make the payment right away. So you first make a request for a payment, and then the bank realizes the bank does the payment. What we do the same, we can do the same with cryptocurrency. So you make all the requests for payments when you are offline, and when you are online, all those payments can be done. So this is also a possible way to deal with cryptocurrencies where in areas where you don't have full time connection.
Brilliant. That's good to know. Excellent. So yes, we've got to move on to some more excellent questions that we have here. I have another one that says, I would like to know what your view regarding privacy is in the context of online transactions. Of course, when people open an account in the bank, they should provide lots of personal information. But when these kinds of financial services are online, banks end up owning much more information about customers and can track people's behavior, such as credit cards. How can this issue be adequately addressed?
So this is also a good question. Blockchain will be an interesting solution for that. What we see, for example, on blockchain use on medical records is exactly a way to maintain all the information of a person, in this case of blockchain for health records. So you retain all the health information of a person in a record. So actually, when I say that, I'm specifically talking about the ledger. So all the information is recorded in the ledger. Imagine all the health information of a person. But the person itself, herself, can choose what kind of information can be released to the health providers. So in the financial system, it would be the same. So imagine that you can collect all your records of your financial life in a blockchain, and then your blockchain, it's yours. So yours, meaning that the financial information of a person belongs only to a person. And then what we're going to see in the near future, I believe, is that it's not all the information, all the financial information of a person, it won't be stored or controlled by a single financial provider. So the financial information of a person will be controlled by the person herself. So meaning that each person will have their own records and her own blockchain of all the financial activities that the person has done in her life. And this person will release this information to the bank. For example, when the person will need a credit loan, so they will, the person will ask for a bank for this information. Then the bank will need lots of the history of the financial information of this person. If the person has the blockchain, so then banks will ask for the person to release part of this information to the bank. Then the bank will evaluate the credit score of the person based on the historic information, financial historic information of the person. But I believe that because of blockchain, this information won't be under control of the financial provider, in this case, the bank, but this financial record will be on and controlled by the client herself. So because the client will have the power for doing this, I think that in the near future, what we'll have is, instead of people asking for the bank about their own financial information, what is happening right now, so banks will ask us about our financial records, meaning that I can have, with my blockchain, my record, my financial record is stored in a blockchain, I can go to different financial providers and see which of them will can offer a better deal for me in terms of loan, if I need a loan, for example. So this, I think, will be a big change for the near future.
Wow, it sounds very exciting, no? Empowering the people with their own information and choosing how they'd like to release it. I think this is I hope we go that way. I hope that's the future. So just we have one more question which I'd like to get in before the session ends. It's one of the learners says, in your videos you say a lot that financial education is key to helping people benefit from digital financial services and the formal sector in general. Can you share some examples of successful, innovative financial education programs that you've encountered?
Yes, so I like this question too. As I told you, I've been researching on community currencies for quite a long time. So what I see in those community currencies scenario is that usually there's a group of people. In Brazil, for example, there are community banks that issue the community currencies. Those community banks, they are responsible to teach people in their community on how to take better care of their financial life. Meaning that they not only they are not only provide the services, the financial services by themselves, but they also help people to make the better choices, because their banks, they are controlled by their own community. One very important aspect of financial education is to teach people how to save, for example. This is important. People actually has problems on saving and planning. So the main issue related to financial education is the idea of planning. And planning is related to think about the future. So when you save, so you're thinking about the future. When you order, for example, insurance or something like this kind of services, you are also make some kind of planning. So then what people need in terms of financial education, people need to understand two things. So we need financial services for now, like, for example, payments and credits are financial services that we need for things that we want to do right now. So if I need payment, I will do a payment now. Or if I don't have money, I can ask credit to use this money right now. So this is present. The most important thing about financial education is future. So if I don't spend money now, if I save money, what I will do this to have to use this money in the future. Or if I want to protect myself against any adversity, so I do some kind of insurance, for example. So since financial education is related to the future, so the best example that I see that is when you have their own community teaching the group of people that live there on how to think better on how to use services in the future. So of course we will always need financial service for the present, but financial education is more related to planning, to think about the future, and that's the biggest problem that people usually have. So to think about the future. So how can I use the service in the future? So a community bank, for example, is the best example that I know on the community teaching itself on how to plan, how to think about the financial service for the future, meaning exactly savings and insurance, which is financial services related to the future.
Oh, that's very interesting indeed. I'm just wondering at the top of my head, I mean, whether, you know, whether this can also be transferred into mainstream education. Now, I think the idea of how people manage their money and how they save, and have an insight of, you know, banks and other alternative methods, and whether that
that's also nice to think about. So I think that financial education is so important that should be a task taken by many different actors. I'm telling you the example of the community currencies or the community banks, but they teach the community on how to save. But this is one case, which is a case where a local NGO help people. But think about the unions, for example, or the church or the schools. So many other institutions have to the opportunity to adopt the idea of financial education. So kids should be should learn about how to save, for example, since they are the very early age. So if you have a church, for example, in a community, so financial education should be taught also in this community. So financial education is so important that it's not, it shouldn't be at least relegated to just one single actor to play a role, to teach people how to save or how to think, to plan about their financial life. So everybody should be engaged on that. So if you think about the public in general, so schools will be, so this is will be government role on financial education. Unions, so in a specific group of workers or in certain community. Community banks and many other cases where that the institutions that should be engaged on teaching financial education.
Wow, that was very interesting indeed. Thank you ever so much, Eduardo. It was very insightful. I definitely enjoyed it thoroughly and learned lots and lots. I hope the learners will also keep sending in questions and keep engaging with this very interesting topic. And I'd like to thank you very much.
I thank you. I thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. You take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.